My name is Adam Kidd. I'm the chair of the Bland County Board of Supervisors, and I'm very happy to moderate this session today talking about workforce development. If you'll notice in your chairs, you have a green slip of paper. Please take time to fill those out at the end. Let VACO know what you think about, what you thought about today's session and things we can improve on, etc. Once you're done with those, you can either leave them on the back table, or we do have a box at the registration table you can place those in. So, without further ado, today, as we look around our Commonwealth, it becomes increasingly clear that for many Virginians, the nature of work, the place of work, and the type of work being done has changed. Compare your community to its image of 50 years ago, and I think you'll see what I mean. It is becoming uncommon to stay in a single career for an entire life, rare to stay with one employer for more than 10 years, and vital to remain adaptable to changing market demands. The result is that Virginia's workforce, along with the rest of the country, is now learning to navigate this new landscape. But how does one become adaptable? How does one gain the skills needed to succeed in this new economy? These are the questions before our panel today, and we will examine how our society can facilitate an environment that allows hard workers to succeed, creating a commonwealth of opportunity for all. We have with us today 3 panel members with extensive experience in this issue area. First, we have Senator Frank Ruff of Virginia's 15th Senate District, Delegate David Bulova of Virginia's 37th House District, and Dr. Craig Herndon, Vice Chancellor for Workforce Development at Virginia's community colleges. And they all have worked to increase career opportunities for Virginians. So why don't we begin with each of you taking a few minutes to speak about your work on this topic. Senator Ruff.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Adam. It's always good to be prepared, and I'm not, so I'm not going to be able to set the ground rules here. How many of y'all are parents or grandparents? Y'all are the problem. Everyone else understands that we need people in this profession, this job, that job. All of you believe that your kids should be at the top of the pile. That they must go to college, they must get good grades, they must be this, they must be that. You don't give, or you have not given them the freedom often to find their own success. You know, my wife and I are just as guilty as everybody else. 2 of them now have master's degrees. One of them started at Tech and came home at Thanksgiving and said, I want to join the Navy. I said, finish the semester, you can. So he did. And it was the best thing in the world for him. He'll be coming out, but he knows that he can make far more with the skills that they taught him than probably at least 2 of his siblings. And that's, but we weren't smart enough to understand, to listen to the fact that what he wanted and what we wanted for him were 2 different things. So I say that, and that did that in jest, but it's too frequent that we're living in a world where we're not listening and we're not paying attention to what's going on. We looked at what success was a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades ago. We're not looking at what success is today. Most of the jobs we're creating in Virginia are jobs that didn't exist when all of us went to school. This is a different world. We have got to, one thing that we have to do is take the blinders off young people and let them understand and explore and understand what is good and what's right and what they want to do. Let them touch on various things so that they can be successful. I wasn't invited to say that, but I just said it because I felt it. I think I was invited because of the workforce bill legislation that we passed a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. After trying to push the House appropriations, we finally were able to get it out. And that structure is very simple. We need people that want and can work with their hands. In 2008, we were losing jobs because people were shedding employees. Those people in their 30s and 40s they would go to the community college and ask and say, can you train me to be whatever? Let's just say a welder. And the response was, sure. We start our class in August or September. Just because it's March or February now, it doesn't make any difference. We can start you then, and then 2 years after that, we can get you to be a welder. Somebody who's in their 30s with one or two dependents will be bankrupt in that process. So a lot of them had to take lesser jobs, or they started the program and then dropped out of the program. That was not a winning formula. So what we did, and Greg was the mastermind of that, was to come up with a plan for shorter training. What we negotiated out was that the student, his family, however he could borrow the money, would be responsible 1/3 of the cost. The college would then have be required, would pick up the cost. The state would pick up the cost of the other 2/3, that being split in half. One, the college would only receive the money if they finished the program. And they would get the other part of the money if they received independent certification of the skills that they had learned, so that they were employable. And the beauty of that was that there was a reason for somebody, whether it be the instructor or somebody in the office, to call that student up and say, notice you haven't been here last day, so what's wrong? And keep those people motivated. I'd heard too many stories about people who applied to community college, got Pell Grants, showed up for a class or two and just disappeared. A waste of taxpayer money, a waste of classroom and instructional time. The other half was, it's a professor. All of us like to be liked. It's just great when people like us. So an instructor would easily give straight A's to everybody and make everybody happy. But if he wasn't producing the product that the private sector wanted, then it was a waste of time. So getting a national certification on the case of a welder, that person could go to work immediately once you get that certification. And we have done extremely well with that. If we had more money, we could do more better. But the return, I think Greg will probably have some data on that in a few minutes, but that is the beauty of that. The Powerline program that was started at Fort Pickett in Nottoway County has finished 7 classes, maybe? Something like that. It started or finished 7 classes. All of those people started out in the, most of them are in their 20s, a couple of them in their 30s, and all of them are making very good money now. Far greater money than they would have if they had just been digging ditches or working at McDonald's. And all of them are very proud, and all of them are very successful at this point, and they have a future for them. So David, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Frank. And it is really good to see everybody here. Actually, that was a nice segue. I am one of those parents who is not guilty of funneling their kids, or at least I did a lousy job of funneling them to a job where there's lots of employment possibilities. My son is very talented when it comes to theater and playwriting and stuff like that, and so he wants to be the next Steven Spielberg. And I'm just enough of a sucker to think I don't want to be the curmudgeon who prevents him from being able to do that. So it's one of these funny things where he actually does have a backup plan. He's very, very practical, but he is off and running in that area. I think, like all of us elected officials, whether you're at the state, whether you are at the local level, the thing that you probably hate to hear that makes you cringe most is that if you have job opportunities that are out there, you've got employers who want to move into your area, you've got employers who are looking to expand, and then you realize there's a mismatch with your workforce. And that means that company is going to go to another state, or it's going to go to another locality. And as Frank said, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to dealing with this issue. And so I want to back up a little bit and kind of focus on the beginning of the pipeline. So he was talking about what happens mid-career, earlier in your career when you decide you need to make a shift. And so I wanted to focus a little bit about how do you develop that pipeline or refine that pipeline to begin with. And so part of it is understanding what your workforce trends are going to look like. And that's a huge challenge. Anybody just has to pick up Wall Street Journal or Time Magazine, and each year they come up with their list of professions that are going to be obsolete in 10 or 15 years, or things that are going to be automated. And so we need to be cognizant of those things. And then the tougher question is how do we recalibrate our education system to be able to adapt to that? That's a real dangerous prospect, quite frankly, because you can look at, hey, we're going to need this number of people who are going to have to, that we think we're going to need in 20 years to do that skill, and what if we're off the mark? Well, then we're retraining them 20 years because we didn't provide them with the skills that they needed. And that's really a large part of what we're trying to do with our education system in general, and the whole idea of a portrait of a graduate in Virginia. And so while it's important to focus in on particular areas that we think are going to be needed, and so cybersecurity is one, computer programming is another, those are things that we know are coming down the pike. Really, we're trying to retool and recalibrate our education system to say, what are those universal things that are always going to be useful when you're out there looking for a career? And so things like collaboration, things like creative development, things like civic engagement. And so stepping back and making sure that we've ground truth those things. Ultimately, though, it does come down to empowering our students to make good choices. And so that's not to say that they're always going to pick a profession where you're guaranteed a job, or they're always going to focus in to say you're going to make a lot of money. But we do a disservice to our students if we don't empower them to make these choices with eyes wide open, so they understand what it is that they're doing and that they can invest their time, energy, and resources wisely. And so I want to talk about two quick stories that really kind of painted my perspective on this and what led to legislation that I introduced and was able to pass last year. And so the first one was a couple years ago. I really love going down to Girls State and being part of their program down there. And quite frankly, the girls ask better questions than the boys. And so I go down to Longwood each year and get to talk to their cities about policy and legislative issues. And after one of those sessions, this young woman came up to me afterwards and she was talking, and I asked her the perfunctory question that I know all students hate to hear, but it was the only thing I could think of to ask: what do you want to do with your life? Where are you going to go to college? And her response kind of surprised me, because she was extraordinarily bright, very articulate, and not surprisingly, she didn't really have a good idea of what she wanted to do, but she was very panicked because her choice of a college really depended on what she wanted to be able to achieve with that investment. And she said, you know what, I really wish that in high school there was a class or a course where I could actually learn about the different professions and occupations and careers that are out there, and that there was somebody who could come in and give me just enough information about it so that I could understand whether that's something worth exploring more, or nah, that's not something that I wanted to do. But she didn't get that information. And so in a way, we succeeded. Again, she was extremely bright, very articulate, but we also let her down. The system let her down because it didn't prepare her coming out of high school to make the most fundamental decisions that any student can make, which is what next? Where do you want to go? And as a parent who's got 2 kids in college, that's a huge, huge investment that they're going to be making. And so you need to make sure you're armed yourself with that. So that always stuck in my mind. Move forward to last summer in 2017, and I was approached by a group of individuals from Virginia's labor community. And so it was the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, it was the American Federation of Teachers, it was the Skilled Construction Trades Council. And they wanted to meet with me because they were really, really concerned about workforce trends in Virginia. And so I sat down with them and they said, you know what, the problem is that we got a lot more people retiring out of some of these skilled trades, so things, like electricians, HVAC, boiler makers, you name it. They're leaving faster than we can get new students interested in these careers. And yet, these careers are booming. They make a good amount of money. There's a huge demand for them. And they said, what's even more frustrating is that it's not about the resources out there to get them into the system. They'd spent a lot of time and effort on apprenticeships, on certifications, on training programs. And they were like, what on earth can we do in order to get these people in? Otherwise, it's going to hurt Virginia's economy. And so we thought about that for a while. And it was about 2 weeks later when I was meeting with Brett Vassy with the Virginia Manufacturers Association at a conference in Newport News. And he shared to me the exact same story. He was really concerned about Virginia's manufacturing industry, and they weren't getting kids interested into that. And it was the same thing again, good paying jobs. And in fact, the Virginia Manufacturing Association had spent over $1 million setting up their own manufacturing institute that would train these students for these jobs. And so it wasn't a lack of resources to do this, it was a lack of being able to get students who were interested. And so once I finally heard from both sides of the perspective on that, we sat down with our Secretary of Education and we said, what do you think? What's the solution to some of this stuff? And they verified, yep, we see the exact same problem. This is something that's on our radar screen, but they said, here's the thing, and this is what surprised me. It's not a high school issue. It goes back further than that. This is actually an issue for middle school. And that's what really, really shocked me. And they said statistically, most kids, most students start making decisions about career opportunities, what they want to do in life, in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And even more so, they start developing their perspectives on what is a good career versus something that has a stigma in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And so if you really want to be able to engage students and broaden their ideas about what a prospective career could be, you need to get them in middle school. And so this is kind of the old adage, politics makes strange bedfellows. You had the unions on the one side, you had business and the manufacturers on the other side, all rally behind a bill that we put in for the 2018 session. And so what that bill did was twofold. Number one, it directed the Board of Education to develop curricula in career exploration that every student in middle school would have to go through. And so the idea is that you could either have a standalone course in career exploration, or you could integrate that into other classroom activities. And so we provided flexibility to our local school boards to figure out how they wanted to do that. But equally as important was that it directed the Board of Education to develop information that could go out to your school districts so that, let's say you have a student that says, hey, I want to be a carpenter, I want to be an electrician, that those schools would then be empowered to say, okay, here are the kind of classes that you need to take in high school, and here are the kind of support structures that are out there in terms of apprenticeships or certifications and the like that you can engage in high school and beyond. And that was pretty cool. And so that bill ultimately went ahead and passed, and it was neat. I got an email from a constituent who knew of my interest in this because they had gotten a notice from their school that this new curriculum would be phased in during the next school year. So it's out there. It's starting to happen. The other issue that I think is worth mentioning is we are lacking in teachers to actually teach these skills once you get into high school. So somebody's expressed an interest, and then who ultimately teaches that stuff? And so Virginia is facing a very acute shortage in teachers. I think the statistic last year was that there were over 1,000 vacancies in our school system at the beginning of the school year last year. And so my home county, Fairfax County, I thought, well, certainly we'd have to be immune from that. Well, we used to a couple years ago, no longer. I think it was a smaller number. It was 80 classrooms that were open at the beginning of the school year, but that's still very impactful for those students who aren't getting that education. But the area where they are having the toughest time finding teachers are two. So special education and then career and technical education. And so last year, Delegate Steve Landis and Senator Mark Peake put in legislation to look at the licensing aspect of this. And so there's a lot of different moving parts with respect to our teacher shortage. And so pay is certainly one of them, professional development, over-testing, those are all part of that. But we wanted to look at the licensure part. Turned out to be a little bit more difficult than we anticipated, because a lot of the people who we want to get into the school system are actually people who were in mid-career. And they've decided, you know what, I really like what I'm doing, but I want to teach. I have a vocation for teaching. How do I go ahead and do that? And so we want to make sure that the system is flexible enough to bring these people in, while at the same time not making it undergird our education system by getting a person to teach who isn't prepared to do that. You can be great at your profession, you can be very skilled, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're a good teacher. And there's a lot of other things that go into the profession of teaching, and you don't want to throw a person in there who's been ill-prepared. At the end of the day, we made precious little progress on the whole licensing issue. I think the only thing that the bill, which did a lot of other really good things, the only thing it did with regard to career and technical education was that it allowed for a 3-year temporary license that had only been applicable for a part-time teacher, and now it was eligible for a full-time teacher, so that you could get somebody who was in there. And so there's a lot more work that we need to do to be able to get these people into a career and ensure that once a student is interested in a career pathway, that they can be supported. Let me go ahead and wrap it up and turn it over with echoing what Frank Ruff was saying, that the other big element of all this is how do we deal with the fact that our economy is changing rapidly and that job types are changing rapidly. And so in areas like Northern Virginia, oftentimes we can react much quicker. We saw the devastation in some other parts of the state when you have a particular industry that moves away and you have to retool, and it's very, very, very difficult. And so our community colleges are extraordinarily important in that story. They are our front line of defense to make sure that as we look into the future that we're able to catch this wave and get these individuals retrained. And I'll also say, and I hope we can do more of this, is that our private for-profit sector schools are also in a good position to help out. And that's oftentimes overlooked. I know that they are sometimes vilified because oftentimes you've got fly-by-night companies who want to make a buck and they're out there to sell a product. But they also have the potential to be very, very nimble if we make sure that they are the tool that they can be and they're properly regulated. And so with that, I am also looking forward to questions, but I think more importantly, I am looking forward to your thoughts and your ideas. You guys are out there on the front line, and so Frank and I as legislators really need to hear from you about what do you think would work, what are the things that the state can do in order to be able to push Virginia forward. So thank you very much, and turn it over to Craig.
So chance to speak with you. I'm Craig Herndon, and I'm with the Community College System of Virginia. And I was thinking, while listening to my fellow panelists, you may go to various sessions like this and want to say thanks for choosing this over high tea today. I think you made a commitment. And I think from what you heard from my fellow panelists, you made the right one, because frequently you go to a session, you hear the same idea repeated in different voices. I think you're hearing some unique perspectives here. I'm going to try to bring something a little more also to the conversation. It's interesting that our conversations have focused specifically on what folks may refer to as career and technical education, or occupations that require not a bachelor's degree. Now, there's a reason for that, I think, in Virginia right now and nationally. You may be aware of the fact that in Virginia, about 15% of the jobs in Virginia require, let's say, low skill, jobs that don't require something beyond high school education. About 35% of the jobs in Virginia require what we consider high skill. Things are a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD, a law degree, and 49% of jobs in Virginia are in that middle area that require more than a high school diploma, but less than a bachelor's degree. Virginia is somewhat unique, though, in that our numbers don't match those needs. While 15% of the jobs are low skill, 18% of Virginians fall in that category. 42% of Virginians are high skilled on average, in that space bachelor's and above, and 35% of Virginians in that middle space, those who require more than a high school diploma but less than a bachelor's degree, The gap is the widest there. 49% of jobs in middle skill areas, and only 35% of Virginians have those skills. That's why I think it's the common thread in this conversation. And so we could easily, I think we could find a well-qualified panel to come here and talk about the strong demand for engineers. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, I heard that very frequently. Virginia needs more engineers. The United States needs more engineers. We do. Let's not dismiss that. But typically, those folks can be imported. You can recruit an engineer from Maryland. You can recruit an engineer from West Virginia or Kentucky, maybe from California. The jobs we're talking about are those jobs require more than a high school diploma, less than a bachelor's degree, and they're typically homegrown. It's really unusual for someone to travel across the state, much less the country, to take one of those jobs. And yet, on average, those jobs in Virginia, particularly with a technology focus, pay in the mid-50s. Now, it includes Northern Virginia with a higher salary. It includes places where my family grew up in Pulaski County, which with lower salaries. But on average, in the 50s in Virginia, when you've reached your midpoint in career. And so they matter in Virginia. And so the fact that we have this gap between the skilled folks we need and the skilled occupations, the skilled people, is relevant. And I would echo the comments of the delegate that a portion of that is attributed to interest and knowledge of these occupations, that parents, students, teachers just don't know the paths it takes to get to those jobs. And I would also reinforce what the senator said, and that it's also a fact that the pathway can be more expensive for these jobs, and yet to the point of deterring people from taking them. So let me give you an example. In Virginia right now, there are thousands of jobs being advertised at Newport News Shipyard. Depending on the size of their next build, whether it's 2 aircraft carriers or 1, they will need between 5, 10, maybe more thousand skilled people in trades. Those jobs pay well. They are family-sustaining wages. And yet, we have a great deal of trouble attracting folks to those jobs, even though in Hampton Roads there are people who aspire to those jobs. Someone who wants to make $19 an hour might be sitting at $12 or $13 an hour right now. The fact that $12 an hour job doesn't afford the resources to pay for what was, before the introduction of Senator Ruff's bill 2.5, 3 years ago, was that one couldn't pay for even a $3,000 bill to gain the skills to become a marine electrician, to become a welder, to become a skilled craftsperson. And so the legislation, so the problem is clear. We have a gap in skills, we have a gap in interested people. The solution, which I'm here to tell you has been remarkably effective, was legislation that said, hey, community colleges, we're not going to pay you what we paid you before. And that was to register students to sit in chairs, and for their very being there, you get paid. It was flipped, and Virginia, to my knowledge, is still the only state in the nation that has a model that pays community colleges for these shorter-term training programs that pays only for results. And so if I were surrounded by a panel of 23 community college presidents who run our community college at the local level, you would have seen 2.5 years ago a great deal of nervousness in their eyes to note their role was changing from being paid for students enrolled to students who complete and earn credentials and go on to family-sustaining wages. But I'm here to tell you, I'm from the future, and you're with me in the future, and you know now that it worked. Let me tell you about how I know this is the case. Well, the bill that Senator Ruff and Kathy Byron and then Governor Culliff championed was a bill that paid for not just results, but only for high-demand credentials, as defined by regions. And so at local government levels, and working across multiple jurisdictions, workforce boards, chambers of commerce, and others came together to identify those skills that are in high demand in your area. And each region in Virginia has a different set of skills that are in high demand. So we're not doing a lot of shipbuilding in Roanoke. We're doing less cybersecurity in Bland County than we are in Northern Virginia, but it's not absent in Bland County. This regional focus, driven by business, has been a pretty critical element of this model. The second critical element is the fact that it pays only for results. So let me tell you about those results. 2.5 years in to the initiation of this new program, which was in legislation called the Workforce Credentials Grant. In practice, we've given it a name that we think is more recognizable to the population we're targeting. It's called Fast Forward. Fast Forward for careers that matter. And we've enrolled and completed 11,389 Virginians with high demand credentials. To give you some perspective, in the year prior to the introduction of this legislation, about 1,000 Virginians earned these high-demand, nationally recognized certifications. In the first year of legislation, about fourth, about 3,500. In the subsequent year, about 6,500. And we're now over 11,000 Virginians with these credentials compared to the 1,000 the year before. So more credentials in the street, that's good, right? Let me tell you about the students, though. To Senator Ruff's point, they're much older than traditional higher education students. On average, they're 36 years old. They look a lot more like us than they do like your children or your grandchildren. They are far more poor than the average Virginian. The average Virginian makes $41,000 a year, and that of course includes the extremes. It includes the high wages of Loudoun County versus the lower median income in Carroll County, relatively speaking. But $41,000 across the state on average. These Virginians were making $21,000 on average before they came to training. These training programs last weeks or months. They don't last 4 years and they don't last 6 years. They're intended to get someone into training and into work as quickly as possible. And because they don't rely on seat time, it's in the community college's best interest to get someone prepared for work as quickly as possible. And how we know they're ready for work is when they pass the externally validated credential that industry sets, not us, as Senator Ruff pointed out. So let me tell you a little more about the results. 11,000 Virginians now have these credentials, and we have access to actual wage records. And so we can know what folks made before they were in training. We can know what they make after training. There's a gap. If you've worked with the Virginia Employment Commission, it's because we need them to show up in the wage records for 2 successive quarters. We know that Virginians are earning on average between 25 and 51% more money after a few weeks of training than they were before. And there are variations in that. Construction, for example, the results are about 130% increase in wages. Imagine for a minute if you or your daughter or your nephew or your uncle could earn 25% more money after a period of weeks of training as opposed to years. The effect is really large because the salaries are not high to begin with, but we do see them in areas like manufacturing ranging from about $39,000 to $37,000 a year before training to $49,000 a year on average after training. They're significant. More than salary increases, and this is an area of personal enjoyment I get to share with you, we did some surveying of students recently because one of the measures we're going to see was, do they make more money? Are they meeting business demand? Let me come back to business demand in a minute. But we also wanted to know what other life changes our folks experience as a result of this short-term training. If you're 36 years old, and by the way, 2/3 of them have dependents, which is compared to the average in higher education, which is 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, depending on what part of the state you're looking at. So these folks have kids. They have kids at home. 2/3 of them do. The changes we've seen outside of wage gains, I don't want to get this wrong since we're being recorded especially, 90% of the folks who experienced these training programs now have employer-sponsored health care. 75% have paid sick leave, 85% have paid vacation time, 88% report working a better work schedule after training they had before, and 82% are now in their most desired field of work. So these are quality of life improvements that have measurable impact on your communities as well. If health insurance, if paid sick leave, if people being home with their children at the right time is important in your communities, these programs are delivering those results. It's not surprising that before training, 1 in 5 of the folks we serve in this program was a SNAP or TANF recipient. We're gathering data now, but our expectations are they're not SNAP or TANF recipients now that they're receiving income boosts between 25 and 50%. For Virginia, and so imagine there are 3 beneficiaries here. The student benefits, they're getting better wages. When I say students, I just mean people, Virginians. It's exclusively reserved to Virginians. It's not for out-of-state folks, it's for Virginians. That's the qualifying factor. Not wages, Virginians. Virginians benefit. Our employer communities are benefiting directly from the result of these now qualified people. 98% of the credentials earned are in Virginia's top 12 most demanded occupations. There are things that may surprise you. Electrician is very high on the list, it's 1 or 2. Welding is very high on that list. Commercial driver's license is very high on that list. A variety of health occupations are very high on that list. So the question I always have is, we got 98% match, what happened to the other 2%? And the answer to that is, they're in more emerging fields like drone pilot operator, or some fields of advanced manufacturing just haven't yet caught on across Virginia, but still we think are part of Virginia's future and therefore are identified as high demand. The last component, the last beneficiary is the Commonwealth. And so we're still new to this, and so you'll forgive me if we have 11,000 folks who earn these credentials. We just have analysis on the first 2,500, so we're kind of looking back in time. Imagine looking at the night sky, because it takes a little while for their data to show up in systems of record. Those first 2,500 Virginians to go through and earn these high-demand credentials in a variety of areas, including cybersecurity, truck driving, medical occupations, you name it. In the year prior to their enrollment, they earned $15 million less than they did the year after. So across 2,500 Virginians, they earned $15 million more for $4 million in income tax withholdings on those first 2,500 Virginians. We can, of course, annualize that over time to know these folks are paying more year after year. You typically don't backslide. Once you earn a credential of some sort of post-secondary level, your chance of becoming unemployed and your chance of using social assistance drop precipitously. And so these are folks who, I won't say are now immune from a bad economy, immune from the use of a social safety net, but they're inoculated in such a way that they're far less likely to be users of those. And so the state's a beneficiary. I look forward to coming back to you or another group in the future and say the precise return on investment, it takes 1.1 years to pay back the $1,233 that this person consumed. That's time will tell, but for the first 2,500, I feel pretty confident saying that there's a benefit to the state. So I'll stop there and return to the panel and be happy to answer questions you have. But before I do, I'll say this. It's been exciting to work in state government on a project for which you can see the results so quickly. If you've worked in government, whether it's an elected official or in part of the apparatus that supports it, sometimes it's really hard to see the results of that work immediately. And when you do, it's really even harder sometimes to quantify them. Someone might stop you on the street and say, hey, I got a job because of that program. And I'll tell you just as a story as I wrap up. Senator Ruff mentioned a power line training program. Virginia had no power line training program before this program initiated. Folks went out of state to become workers for Dominion, AEP, or any number of the co-ops in Virginia. And sometimes they came back to Virginia and sometimes they didn't. And when they left Virginia, they typically paid between $10,000 and $14,000 to get that training. So they came back with some debt. The program at Southside Virginia Community College is our first in the state. It costs a few $1,000, $3,000 to get all the credentials you need to work for Dominion, for AEP, or for the co-ops. A mother of one of our students pulled aside the chief of workforce at Southside Virginia Community College and said, "I'm going to show you something." And she showed him her phone. On the phone was her son's pay stub. He just completed the program and was immediately sent to Florida to work to recover that state after a major storm. And she said with great pride, "My son just earned in a month what I earned in an entire year." You changed his life, and you changed his soon-to-be-born daughter's life by providing this opportunity. So we can tell those stories, but I'll tell you on a larger scale, and there are many of them, the effect of this work is quantifiable, it's measurable, and we're excited about it. It does not, however, solve all the problems that you heard on this panel. There are still interest gap issues. There are still affordability issues. This pertains to a narrow set of programs, but I think it's promising.
All right, let's give us some questions. Open it up to the audience. Yes, sir.
Well, the senator asked for some comments so he can went on. So I'm going to give you some. You said middle school was an important age group. I agree with you. That's what we found in the last count. We need to not only reach the middle schoolers, but you think from 7 to 12, that's 5 years. We can't wait 5 years to start turning out interested people in vocations. We've got to get to them now. So we need to double our efforts in the high schools to make them more important, to make them more aware. That training really needs to be impressed upon the school teachers, because so many of the teachers have no idea what an electrician costs. In my manufacturing plant, when I have to bring an electrician in, I pay $65 an hour. Not bad money. And of course, his employer does some of it. I've had opportunities to speak to teachers. They have no idea what some of these trades pay. So we need to do a better job, and also they need to understand some of the physical attributes may work inside, outside, up on ladders, plumbers may, they have no concept of those things because it's not in any of their training. It's not bad that they don't know, but if we expect them to convey that information, we need to get that information. Number two, we only work on high school students. We're missing the bulk of the people we need to reach. We have too many high school students, I believe, that graduate high school and they go, I'm all done now. I'm on, and when they get 23 or 24, they got a couple of kids, they need to make more money. So we, in our county, just created a job coordinator counselor to try to tie all these programs together because we can't make enough jobs, train people to fill those jobs. And the third thing, and I'm glad the guy from the community college here, that Alaska County too, the community college is ill-equipped to track success. Every time we talk to community colleges, I've been on the workforce development board a couple of years, you ask them, give me some statistics of how many people get jobs after 30 days of graduating. Can't do it. What do we hear from them? We don't have enough people. But yet, my alma mater, Old Dominion University, if you look what their job placement center says, they can tell you exactly what graduates left at, how much they made, and what industry they went. What do those universities know that apparently the community college can't? If you ask them any kind of statistics of how successful the community colleges are, they have trouble doing it. And what I hear is we don't have enough people to do those things. So there's some disconnects, legislators, that we need to close. And most importantly, we need to think about those Virginians that graduated high school with thanks, and now they're in the real world and they're in real life. We've got to bring them back and get them the training they need. Because just exactly like you said, we have jobs going unfilled, $40,000 entry wages, we just don't have the training for it. And we can't make the training. So we need help. We need help in the right way. And whatever the community college needs to do to be able to help our localities track the success of those local graduates, help them or mandate it or give them some funding or whatever it takes. Because, when we ask the community college, if we send you money over there to do a task, how successful will you be? Well, we can't tell you. How successful were you 2 years ago? Most of them got jobs. It's not good enough. We can't invest the taxpayers' money. I can't stand an election and invest the taxpayers' money unless I know what kind of return of investment I might get. That's the problem. So I hope those give you some ideas to go back to real.
Those are good points. I will follow up on the issue about what the teachers know and what they don't know. About 6 or 7 years ago, I took all 12 of the school superintendents from District 8 to Rolls-Royce in Prince George County. They had never seen the white floor. They were marveled. You could go in there, do your work, come out of there in an evening gown, be just as clean as you went in. If the superintendents don't know, how is the message getting down? We've got to do a better job of communicating these opportunities, whether it be to the teachers in the classroom, the guidance counselors, or whether it be those young people who finish the system, understand they can come back and in 6 weeks be making good money. But they've got to do something on their own.
Let me give you one other area that we're woefully short. We've created a lot of commercial truck drivers. Right, we have no school in Virginia that I'm aware of that teaches heavy equipment operators how to run a backhoe excavator.
We have
Unless somebody's created one.
We have.
We need that. Because we've got too many people that don't know those skills.
They exist both in Southside, they exist in Lord Fairfax, and now we'll be moving them out to Germanna, which is in Fredericksburg, and will soon be available in Charlottesville as well. So we'll
How
have,
about west of there?
we would welcome a chance to work in that part of the state as well.
We would welcome you to be there.
Can I touch something on what he just said real quick before we get off? When he talked about the middle school and where we need to go, I just was in the school safety committee and they talked about school counselors doing things besides counseling. Well, there's the point right there that he was making. Those counselors need to know what we're saying in here about workforce rather than grading papers and monitoring classes.
Absolutely. If you could just hold your questions until you're recognized, please, so we can get to everyone's questions. That's no problem. Just moving forward.
And I'm glad you jumped in, because that was a really good point. And I think to what you're saying, I agree. We got to make sure high school is as meaningful as possible, and you got to make sure that this information gets down to the teachers. To each of those points, one of the things that the bill that we passed last year does, again, is to have the Board of Education develop those packages of information that can be pushed down to your school districts, that get pushed down to your teachers. I know one of the things that the stakeholders were very concerned about is what is in there, and then making sure that it's manageable information. And so I know that they are actively working with the Department of Education right now to put together those modules. I think time will tell to see whether they are effective or whether we need to go back and retweak those. But another point that I think was really important is, what do you do in high school and how do you maintain that interest? And so another part of that bill was for the Board of Education to do a study on how do we make the academic and career plan documents that students are currently have to fill out more meaningful and dynamic. And so I know when my kids went through school, they had to fill out this academic and career plan, but it was a snapshot, and it was a piece of paper, and it didn't provide you much with respect to follow-up. And so what the Virginia Manufacturing Association was aiming at with this study is, there's no reason why we can't make something like that cloud-based, and that we can't make it much more dynamic. And so make it a tool for that student, not only in middle school, but throughout their entire high school. And it's a great way to go ahead and get that communication and that information back and forth, so that as things change, as interests change, you can have that ongoing career planning. And so I think the potential for that is, I think there's a great potential for that. I think it's really important. To your point about career counselors, I thought the exact same thing when the safety committee was talking about putting in a lot more money towards those career counselors. And so I know their focus is ensuring that you can deal with the mental health and other issues that just come naturally as you're going through high school, and provide that kind of support. But another important part of the job of a counselor is that career part. And again, speaking from personal experience, my kids got precious little, in-depth engaged feedback from a career counselor. And so, again, I think we have an opportunity to right-size the funding that the state provides for counseling. Goes back to our standards of quality. What is the right number of career counselors or counselors per students? And right now, that's a little off kilter, except for the districts that can afford to go ahead and hire more on their own dime. And we know most districts can't do that. And so I think that's a very good point, well taken. I think we need to marry up those two concepts as we're going into the General Assembly.
In the interest, I'll be very brief on the question about availability of data on success of community colleges. Very strong area of interest for us, and I think that in the past 6 months to 18 months, we've become a lot more adept at that. So particularly in matching wage outcomes of students, I think I'm not sure what the old phrase is, the opposite of good has been imperfect. In this case, I wouldn't call it perfect. I don't think any institution can claim perfect data on this, but I think we are pretty darn good at it these days.
So that's just in the last 6 months?
Yes, better matching for sure.
Thank you.
Sir?
I just wanted to add in on this. Is it really a teacher that's going to promote careerism in the school? Or is there a class type thing that we need to be doing? A coursework, because they're focused on SOL. And I also want to piggyback on something else I seen at the Economic Development Conference, because I don't think the guidance counselor really reaches enough people. And we all admit that there's no funding for it. But I had a conference I went to in Alaska, they talked about a program Tennessee had called the Ready Program. And I think I heard, and I'm not knowledgeable on this one, Dallas County has something similar, where they have a team of people participating and mentoring these kids, because a lot of them qualify for free financial aid if they just get someone qualified to sit down and show them how to fill out the paperwork and start guiding them towards a college or whatever career they're wanting to go to. So what do we have that's really hitting that? Because I see a lot of, where I'm at, we have a lot of the community. I can tell you, my wife grew up in a very poor family, and her way out was joining the Air Force in the military. We came back and settled back there. And I look at a lot of our brothers and sisters, and a lot of the kids, even when I substitute, I see the kids doing the same thing. Their mindset was only what their parents had taught them. So we've got to figure out a way to break the cycle in some of these families and get those kids involved. And we want to be careful that we're not killing dreams, because sometimes I feel we kill the dreams of the kids because they only know what they're. I had one kid that was like wanting to be a coal truck driver because his dad did it. And I asked him, because coal was dead that year, is that really your life plan? You may want to think that plan with what's going on right now. So I don't know if that's a teacher or a special class that you need to have.
Yeah.
That teaches them basic life skills plus reaching out to become whatever they can be.
Yeah, great question, and I think the answer is both. So the bill in particular requires the Board of Education to develop curricula, and so that is either a separate course or you have to take the curricula and integrate it into your other coursework, and so.
Well, and I say this because, like, I remember when I was in college, there was one class you had to take that got you ready to submit a resume and all that, cover letter, all that, and get into the world.
Yeah,
Job market.
but once you go through a course like that, I think that it comes down to your teachers and ensuring, ensuring that our teachers have enough knowledge to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I think your point, I forget the program that you went ahead and mentioned, but it sounds to me like it involves wraparound services, and I think that's something that we'd be interested in
they had
hearing.
the kid doing community service, but in a turn, they said, okay, you may not qualify to apply for Harvard, but what you want to do is taught by this university, and they help the child get to that point.
Yeah, and so
That program is ACE, A-C-C-E, I believe.
In Tennessee, it was called the Ready Program. I just was more familiar with that. And I'm just saying we need something to reach those, because they come from a family that doesn't promote, they've never had a college graduate. I'm not trying to just say for college. You've got to do vocational skills too. We've got to have those kind of programs.
Good deal. So ACE and Ready are programs we ought to be looking at.
I would point out that there's an organization called GRASP, which is in about a quarter of the counties in the state. And they put in part-time assistance, guidance folks. They do everything from helping the person fill out the FAFSA report to forms and to they finding scholarship money for both technical skills or for 4-year or 2-year schools. So there are groups that are doing it. Theirs is a private thing in which they look for 1 or 2 contributors from the community to help fund it, and that's been very successful.
And we need something like that, because I mean, in my time, I mean, I've seen from college families, I've seen kids that their parents start at kindergarten, they're gaining the system, doing things like, I'm going to start Johnny a year later, because he's more apt to be the leader of his class if he starts a year later. We've got families and where I'm at that never have had a college grad. They've got to have something to break that cycle, because that's a drain on our resources too. Sorry, I'll shut up.
No, you're fine. I see several hands. I'll try to get to them in the order I've seen them. Sir?
Yeah, I think there's another source of assistance that's untapped, and that is the beneficiaries of all this education, which are the businesses. Every business in our community has, or should have, a new employee training program. And they've all got to train their employees to get them ready to work on their machinery or whatever it is they've got going in theirs. And so if there's a way to consolidate all of that and provide access to the kids from middle school on, they can get a smattering of all the jobs that are available in their community, at least a lot of the good paying ones. In our community, in our region, the school superintendents have begun gathering to set up such a program. My county's making available property on which they can build a facility into which local businesses will be invited to set up their lathe, their mill, whatever their equipment is that they want trained on. And the kids, it'll be part of their high school education. They'll do time in this facility, and they'll be exposed to all these different jobs. And by the time they graduate from high school, some of them will know exactly where they want to go work and will already be trained on the local equipment. The cost for that equipment will be donated by the businesses. The teachers will be the shop foremen and the superintendents to come in and teach how to use that equipment. And I think that can be written into your bill to facilitate that, to allow the schools to let local businesses help teach what needs to be taught.
Which locality are you from?
Region 2000 down near Lynchburg, Amherst County.
Thank you. Yeah.
Gentleman in the back, and then you may be next.
My background is construction and engineering, and there's a couple of programs already in progress for your major construction companies entering ABC and the General Contractors Association is putting it on now. It's the NCCRE. And why can't we hook up with those folks and follow their format? And so they're the ones who's meeting these workers, and they need roughly 177,000 by 2025 in Virginia alone because of retirement that we have from the workforce coming out. And I'd like to hear from you.
I can respond a little bit to that question. Yes. I can elaborate if you like. Yes, we are, at Virginia's community colleges, we're using the NCCER curriculum in direct relationship to the organizations you mentioned. And so the power line training program at Southside Virginia Community College, the welding programs at Piedmont Virginia Community College are using that curriculum driven by industry so that folks, when they leave, aren't certified to the standards of the college, they're certified to the standards of industry. So I wholeheartedly agree.
We need to figure out a way to mash. Why reinvent the wheel? You've got 500 major construction companies that put this program together. And we need to implement it in our public schools and our junior colleges.
My request is to the community college system to not be confined. We spoke in terms of regions, but my suggestion to you is that, well, a couple of things. One is if you want to confine, if you're going to be confined to regions, then I'm sunk because I don't have any industry really in my region. So therefore, if you're only going to offer cybersecurity in Northern Virginia, but I think I have a lot of kids who may like that and who would be willing to relocate. And I have to be willing, and I am willing to lose some people for a while because if I don't develop this workforce in my region, I'll never have it. So I'm asking the community college system to not be locked into regions and to cast your net more broadly statewide. I can't be unique in that.
Your point's a fair one, and I'll give an example. So for the program I described, this Fast Forward program, it would be pretty targeted. We want to make sure that the scarce resources, and Senator Ruff pointed this out, the first year of the program was funded about $4 million to consume those resources in the form of producing credentials right away. $7.5 million second year, $7.5 million worth of credentials that year. $9.5 million the subsequent year. I have no trouble thinking that we'll produce $9.5 million of credentials and then some. So we really have some limitations on funding that produce the credentials. That said, at our colleges broadly, Danville's a good example. We went from the Danville area here. Danville Community College produces exceptionally trained machinists, world class. They have a fantastic program at Danville Community College, and folks don't necessarily stay in Danville when they achieve that credential. Many of them are going to Lynchburg to work for Arriva or BWXT. I hope that over time the community is garnering the critical mass of qualified people to draw in more companies that would then be likely to locate in Danville
because Danville's community is producing, and many of those folks want to return to their community. So the answer is yes, but in the world of scarce resources, in the Fast Forward program, it would be challenging to say, let's put together a whole bunch of cybersecurity folks in a community for which there's not currently jobs available in hopes they would relocate. So it's a delicate balance.
Your localities will probably be willing to participate though and help funding and, online would be much more doable in many respects. I know also the folks in Danville I've been talking about, and I in fact did reach out to the shipbuilding and maybe the port, and they are now, I just read like a day after I said it out loud, that I read the article about those folks reaching out and working now with folks in Danville. So there is that distance. But if we could adopt more of this approach, and I understand about the resource limitations, but that is entirely consistent with what I'm hearing about middle school, high school, the middle school approach. Because if we're going to take that position that we can only train regionally, then this would be a terrible thing, in my opinion, to limit your conversations with your middle school students to what you have in your region. We want to open up the world. So we have to then we have to walk the walk.
Sure, that is
to do that. So please, I'm asking you, please figure out a way and need money. I don't know, maybe we'll go to Virginia or something. I don't know, we'll do it.
Money will help.
Yeah.
Sir?
Yeah, thank you. I own a home improvement company. It's a small company, so I have like 10 employees. But one of the things I've noticed over the years is that it used to be that it was hard to find the guys that have the skills, but then they didn't have the IT skills, so they weren't good at handling email, computer. And we're a little bit tech oriented in the way that we service our clients. Now what's happened is gone the other way, where you got younger guys, they know the tech, but they don't have, and they have the technical skills, carpentry or electrical or otherwise, but they don't have those soft skills about how do you actually communicate with the client. How do you communicate the work that you just did, fill out your timesheet, and actually log what you actually accomplished? How do you read the instructions that are provided to you? Believe it or not, this happened just last week. The guy goes in, he installs the toilet in the wrong bathroom because he didn't read plain English. It's not that he can't read, it's that he's not, just generally hasn't come out of our educational system, I don't think, with an understanding that reading is important, that you've got to read. So he can actually, he's not illiterate, but he doesn't know, the importance of that. And so I think I'll roll this all into one larger comment that maybe you can respond to, which is that obviously the workforce is changing. The world is changing very fast. Kids are not, have different skill sets. They come out with different values. They're looking for different things. I would say my experience has always been that money talks, the rest of the sentence, and that if we can create a program that for the technical trades, that's whether you want to call it a badge system or whatever, but where, in every other profession, you've got all these certifications. The tech sector actually did this. You got your A+ certification and your, pick all the letters of the alphabet, right? You can always find everybody's got all their certifications that they've built. Right now, if I want to hire somebody, I have no way of knowing, everybody comes in and says, well, I'm a carpenter. Well, the unions have some things, and there are, but there's no standardized thing. So if we want to talk about, how do you start to build aspirations in kids that starts at the middle school level, you have to have things to point to say that are discrete, recognizable, concrete goals that have dollars attached to them. And I think the more that we do that, it makes it easier for employers to communicate with employees in terms of expectations, both for performance and pay, and it gives something to teach to, and it gives something for kids to aspire to.
Good point. I would say that all people in here are legislators or of some nature, but we're also citizens of the community. And whether you are a businessman or, as some folks over here were saying, we need to get people into the schools, talking to young people, explaining what opportunities there. It's easy for me to stand up here and preach. But if you can go in and show somebody the skills that they need, if you go in and you can communicate with them, I think that's the point they were making. And I think that's the point that we all have a responsibility to make. I know that when we first went into financial literacy, the banks in Clarksville jumped on the opportunity to go into the elementary schools and talk about financial, how to handle a checkbook and how to do this and how to do that. So I think we all have a role in this.
You raise that's a really interesting point. I like the way that you went ahead and phrased kind of the question or the comment with regard to the importance of those soft skills. And so professionally, I actually work for an engineering firm, and we struggle with engineers or technical people who can then translate those ideas into plain English that a community or an elected official can understand. In kind of thinking through how do we solve that conundrum, part of it is what we're doing or trying to do with our standardized tests in Virginia. And so I don't know where Frank kind of stands in all this, but we have been very big into accountability with respect to can you read, can you write, but they're test based. So it's an end of the year. Teachers will teach to the test, and you figure out what is your rote knowledge that you've been able to accumulate. And what we've been trying to do over the last couple of years is move from that paradigm to a testing paradigm to more of an assessment paradigm, where you are still have that accountability, but now you are saying, all right, what did you learn, and then how do you apply that to the real world? And so I think by doing that, we make these things much more real for these students in terms of how do you apply them in real life. And so hopefully that'll start to make up some of that gap, where writing and reading aren't just things that you see on a test where you're filling in lines. You're actually looking at, all right, how do you actually apply this in real life? But we're very cognizant of that issue, and it is important. You can give somebody a great technical skill, but if they're not able to apply that, through either written language or through verbal communication, you got a problem.
I'd like to build on what Senator Ruff said. So your company's bigger than mine, but my company, we led the development of the workforce development program with Southside Virginia Community College because we saw a need. I've had some staff resources in my company to support my kids' middle school, create a partnership program. My point is, you can't look to government and ask them to go solve a problem. We live in these communities, we see the need, we go to solve the problem. And we should not be blaming other people or looking to other people to go solve the problem. We should just, when we see the need, go solve the problem. And if we all do that, we will solve the problem. If we all spend time thinking it's somebody else's problem to solve, the problem will be there forever and ever.
Gentlemen, would you?
I just want to make a comment. I've worked a lot with family school just by pure desire to see a change. In my locality, we've seen trade students that were getting ready to drop the room back. We went back to those eyes. We didn't have the people who could do the work that's needed in the field. And in 2013, there was a study done by the International Code Council about code professionals, across the United States, everywhere, and the average age of those people in their retirement time. So here we see the trades dropping out of school. So they put together what started as a high school technical training program that worked mostly in construction side. We've got lots of welders, they work it's based on construction. It's a program that can be integrated into any one school career. It's almost CPD, and you can go look. Building, residential building, plumbing, electrical, mechanical, masonry, and energy. And energy is a hot topic too. So that program, we brought it into that school, and I'm telling them they're getting rid of this program. I got it into the high school. My board of supervisors helped fund me into that high school, and I've helped get into several scenes. But and I took the time because that's the thing. Now we sit and talk about what we want everybody else to do, but we don't take all that stuff. It's just hard. Took the time. I reached out to the school. I said, look, I'd like to mentor, 1 or 2 of your kids. They can come up, go in the building office with me, whatever they want to do, we'll look at things and just talk to them. It was like an hour a week. You had one student in the state of Virginia, 17 years old. He had all 4 of those certificates with a year and a half. 17. I was training a residential building inspector for our locality. He had to go take the certification test. I just wanted to see what little bit of work I'd done with this guy would do in relationship to my inspector that's coming in and had experience, should have been able to just jump right on. So we took time and I just asked, how would you like to go take this test? I sent him, and that man passed that certification test. And I can tell you, 2 people rode back in that vehicle home and I was going to take. So, you know, you can take the time, you can get the skill sets in. And that, he went to work making electrical devices. Because first of all, when he walked in to put in his application, he showed that he had certificates from the International Code Council. Says, I know a little something. And the International Code Council for base model code for the codes and all in. So, and this just backs that up. Now that program's been expanded now until it can go into colleges. So they've made a second level curriculum. But they're not asking a teacher or anyone to teach anything different than they had, just to add this tool. That student can move as fast or slow as they like. We've had great success with it in our area. And I made a point of having a building safety month, which Steve helps me out with here. And I make sure that the kids who go through that program and get those certificates, we went in conjunction with Lowe's Hardware on a contractor appreciation day. So we have their contractors in. And they see those kids get these certificates. So who do you think they're looking for their entry-level job? I mean, the thing is, it's going to take effort from everyone in here, not just what can someone else do for them. Thank you. I know it's so long.
We only have about 3 minutes. Anybody else? Sir?
Just on certification, when you first brought it up, I cringed because our certification process seemed to take a dive toward passing the test, and I think you mentioned that, rather than whether you were teaching them what to do. And I can tell you, in 2011, about 2010, 2011, when I was getting out of the military, there was a congressional mandate that all these network professionals be certified. And literally, the certification process is, here's the question bank. Memorize as many answers, correct answers as you can. And if they fail, then here's the test bank you can memorize. They weren't getting trained on how to do it. They were getting prepped on how to pass the test. And I think that's something we've got. Sounds like he's got it. He went and trained his guy, and he did better.
Well, you know, training's just a bar. I mean, they have to have the background.
Yeah, they do.
And
We just finished
building
building a brand new school in Dickinson County. And for our 8-year building inspector that did the inspections on it was certified in one thing, soil erosion. We fired him immediately after I got on the board because he was already on probation. But for 8 years, they carried this guy. He couldn't pass any certification.
Find any 20-year-old that plays video games and you don't get certification for what you test you pass, you get certification for what you do. You accomplish at the level.
Yeah.
And that's what they understand. They think that way. They think about, I do this, I get to this level. I do that, I demonstrate what I know and what I've done, and I get to this level. It's about demonstration, not about passing a test.
Yes, that's what he was.
We have time for one last question. Sir?
I'd just like to say that most of us in here elected officials, and all of us work with our economic development people at the county level, and involve these people with your schools, with your community colleges. Bring in these career fans, bring in these professional people, bring in these employees, and let them come to have job fairs in your high schools and in your community colleges. And they're glad to host these things. I challenge them, go talk to these kids in person. Take a school board member with them.
As a business person, it's so much fun to embarrass your daughter when you walk in.
Tell them how you, you know, what's required for your job. And you know, you're talking middle school and high school students. show them by example what a work ethic is. Because a lot of young people, as mentioned, don't have a family member that's even gone to college or got out of high school in some cases. Because a lot of us are from rural areas, and show them that they can, be successful and encourage them, mentor them. Civic organizations are a wonderful resource in all our communities. And these people do an outstanding job. But, we do have partners, because my hat's off to the community college. We've never gone to them with any workforce development issue. They haven't gone above and beyond to make that program work. They had to start from scratch sometimes, like with the lineman program and others. But they are always there to help us, and we do need to use them resources.
Well, I've got 4 o'clock, so that's all the time we have. Any final thoughts before we go from our panelists? Let's give them a round of applause for their time.